everybody, and this is the Who Are You series, and I must say I'm so pleased to have my beautiful soccer diva back with me from LA and an Arsenal tube station sign in the background, which what we love it. How are you? How are you, Soph?
I'm doing good, mate. How are you?
I am fantastic. I'm fantastic. I'm really looking forward to this one because
I think this is a great question, and we've talked about this a little bit on the Highbury squad too. And what I love is that even before I met you, I had this massive respect for George Graham, the mentality, the way he managed. I mean, Super Kev, there was this DNA of Scottish managers from like the 70s onwards.
Yes.
They just had this, not specifically, known for, having great players in their squads and having these incredibly strong international teams and whatever. So you have these managers, some played, some didn't. Obviously, George, we know, did pretty well for himself as a player as well. And this DNA that they have, I just think is really quite fascinating. And I've always wanted to kind of read up more about it, delve into it, when you have the Sir Alex Fergusons of the world and a whole breadth and depth of them. And I think that with George Graham, he came at a time too where foreign coaches weren't the norm in Division 1, were they?
No, they weren't.
And so the way he kind of came in and took over Arsenal and completely transformed them, I had a tremendous amount of respect for that. But then when I met you and I started talking to you and I would hear the stories, his methodologies, how he would treat players, talk to players, handle players, manage players, looking at people as individuals as well as a collective team, how we're going to perform, and the fact that he wouldn't suffer falls and all these types of things. I just really think when we look at like the pantheon of the greatest managers to have managed in the English game, I actually do think that he does get slighted in many ways. And I think that's definitely because of what came after him with Mr. Wenger. And I think with the Invincibles era, I think that's underlined for a lot of the younger generation, Wenger's greatness. Right? Kind of like as well when, there were still strong players, big players, and, but Mertesacker may have been 6'10", and as you know, I stood next to him and I look like this big, but yeah. He was skinny and slight. He wasn't 6'500" and strong, right? Yeah. But the thing with Mertesacker is positionally he was very smart. He knew where to be and how to be. And, today there's a lot of stuff because of the FA Cup, and it was a flawless performance by him. And he took young Rob Holding under his wing in that game. And he showed him. Incredible. But then we went into that smaller player mode. And I think the transfer, a lot of the times, Wenger was always trying to be smarter than he was when it came to that type of stuff. I talk to Billy Bean a lot. He's a good friend. And, as you know, with Moneyball and what he kind of created, Arsenal adopted a lot of that philosophy of statistically finding players, cheaper players, but players who would be able to perform within a system if they ran X amount of kilometers in a game, if they ran from this point to this point 50 times in a game. I mean, the data and the analytics in terms of how we started to purchase players in the transfer market, I know drove Arsenal fans completely crazy, because meanwhile you've got Chelsea buying Didier Drogba, and you've got us buying Luis Boa-Morte, and I think there was this frustration that we weren't competing. And when you're seeing the Chelseas, the Uniteds, then this emergence of Manchester City, and we're still trying to pick pockets when it comes to transfers because we're just not making that investment. I think that was the biggest struggle. But at the same time, so we have these tremendous wage bill that, Arteta Unai inherited it. Let's be fair. Yeah. Arteta's inherited it now. We've got financial issues, and we're going to have to think really smart. We need really good business people right now to manage the business and figure out how we're able to move along. But to not lock down Oba, who I think is worth the money. I mean,
well,
Casey.
Let me just ask the last question, because you've just led it perfectly, Sophie, into if Arteta doesn't have the transfer funds to make major signings, what next for Arsenal? So it tied in just with what you're talking about.
It's a tough one because then you're looking at loan deals, right? Which also aren't cheap
ain't
sometimes.
The worst. But it isn't the worst.
No, it's not the worst scenario. We saw Derby County, Frank Lampard, using loans from his old club and other clubs to get Derby into at least the playoff game. They didn't win to get to the Premier League, but you have to be smart.
It nearly worked. Yeah.
Right. It nearly worked. And so I think that's going to be one way. I think also Arteta, Edu seems to have, if you can find a Martinelli for 8 million, we do that kind of business all day long.
Yeah.
Right. Because a lot of these younger players as well aren't on 100 grand a week yet. I think that's one thing Arsenal have done really quite well and kept to it as long as they could, was that wage structure, right? And then that went out the water with the Ozils of the world and the Rambos and all of that type of stuff. But it's going to have to be loan deals. We're going to have to get rid of, it might be, we have to just, for the next couple of years, know that we're not going to challenge, we're not going to win the league, but we're going to build a team.